Hmm.
Woohoo!
The event that just happened in our household is I just bought Hogwarts Legacy. As you can hear in the background, it's being played right now by your little brother.
Gotcha. So why did you buy it?
Well, you know, it wasn't even really that big of a decision, right? So quite honestly, I have a PS5. I like to play it. It's been a while since the game came out. This was the next big title that came out. And I probably wouldn't have, I was kind of on the fence about buying it. But then once the reviews came out and said it was like a really good game, I was like, well, yeah, I'm going to check it out.
So did you consider the protests at all when, like, buying this game?
I mean, yes, right? Like, I'm aware of them. But I guess there were two things, ultimately, that made them, not really have an effect on my buying decision.
Gotcha.
One is I just don't fully know if I agree with the protests.
Mm-hmm.
Like fundamentally, I just don't know. I haven't delved into it completely.
Mm-hmm.
And two, like, I don't know. There's part of me that doesn't. I don't really want to make buying decisions based on someone's political beliefs.
HK Rowling has said some things online that have been wildly controversial for, like, many people. So, like, should we talk about that?
Well, yeah. So obviously, the first thing I said was, that I wasn't fully sure I supported the protests or hadn't really gotten into them a little bit. So yeah, we should, I think that's the right philosophical thing to do, right? Is you actually find out what the person said who's, under attack, I guess.
Gotcha.
Right? Would you agree?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So this is an actual quote from JK.
Okay.
If sex isn't real, the lived reality of women globally is erased. I know and love trans people, but erasing the concept of sex removes the ability of many to meaningfully discuss their lives. It isn't hate to speak the truth.
So it seems like by saying that, she is trying to say that many trans people have been eradicating sex as a concept entirely. And she doesn't like that because, as a feminist, she thinks that sex is important for discussions, especially regarding women and their rights.
Talk to me a little bit about why or how that's offensive to the transsexual community.
Well, I think a more modern word that's used currently is transgender. But she did say that she knows and loves trans people. But I think that, similar to how things have been said with any group of minorities, claiming to love a group of people is not the same as respecting them or their identities and truly supporting them for who they are. And I think she's made that pretty explicit in just her statements and the implications behind those statements. And by saying that, by using the term, like, sex isn't real to fuel her argument, by saying, oh, well, of course sex is real, and this is sort of misogynistic thing to say, or at least, like, take some of the nuance away from feminist discussions, I think she's either ignorant or intentionally misrepresenting the trans community in order to make her argument seem more intelligent and correct. Because I don't think anyone's really said that sex isn't real. I think people have said that gender, as in like the pronouns you use, your representation of your identity, is more of a societal concept. But I don't really think people have even said that that's not real either. It's just more of a flexible thing that has been originally determined and not quite as connected to sex as we believe. And through trans people, and also lots of things about how scientific advancements, and knowing more about things like intersex people, and how different, like, hormones can affect you, and, like, chromosomes, and how that can't exactly match up to your body, it's become more apparent that sex isn't as black and white as it's always seemed. So if she's seen anyone saying that sex isn't real or anything along those lines, that's probably what they were referring to. So it seems to me here that she's either intentionally or just ignorantly creating a straw man argument for trans people in order to fuel her own arguments, which is, of course, the feminist argument, which is an argument that I feel like most people that believe that they're relatively progressive use against trans people. They'll say that it's feminist. They'll say that I think like the term is like a TERF, which is like a trans exclusive radical feminist.
Right.
But I don't think that including trans women in the general title of woman is really causing much harm to women as a whole or feminists, especially considering that trans women do go through similar discrimination when they try to transition as a cisgender woman. I think that the political component in the word woman remains somewhat intact. And so I think that overall, through her entire argument, she's definitely attempting to seem as correct as possible, and she's using some somewhat respectful language as well as claiming that she knows and loves trans people in order to make her arguments seem as palatable as possible. But in the whole of it, when you really get down to what she's saying and what her words mean and the implications of what she said, then it becomes apparent that it doesn't really seem like she does know and love trans people, as in the majority of the trans community, or at least she doesn't respect them and their identities, and that her words, while might not being entirely the truth, are also very harmful to the trans community.
Yeah, I mean, I think that accurately describes the hurt that this causes. I mean, the whole notion of being a transgender person is that you are internally, usually often the opposite sex of what you are biologically. Mm-hmm. And for someone to say that you don't qualify as the term that you absolutely believe that you are, feels like it's invalidating your internal state.
Yeah.
Which is what all prejudice is, right? Yeah. And that's extremely that's extreme. Like, there's nothing more frustrating as a person for another person to tell you that your feelings about yourself are simply invalid.
Yeah, like that can go for any feelings whatsoever.
Well, right, and I think that religious people can certainly relate to that, right? Because they certainly get a lot of that from secular society.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, we're going to yeah, you can say whatever you want to about God and all this stuff, but it sounds like you're just kind of making that shit up.
Yeah. Yeah, bringing up like your,
right?
yeah, I mean, like bringing up your one thing about like when you were a Christian and you were at like dinner and like the incident and you like ran away crying. Yeah. I think you could like compare that. I think that would be a similar feeling. Like, I think you felt a similar feeling to how like a trans person would feel when they're misgendered or transphobic slurs.
Yeah, when someone invalidates your internal feelings about yourself, that's frustrating.
Yeah.
Super frustrating and hurtful.
Someone completely invalidating your entire identity or a large part of your identity and saying that who you are isn't real is incredibly hurtful to you.
Well, it's the same thing with like gay marriage, yeah. Right? I mean, I think there were some valid arguments to say, well, why don't you just call it a civil ceremony or whatever else, right? Like, I mean, it seemed like that was a compromise position, right? But the fact is that, gay people, I think, rightly pointed out that marriage, that word, has connotations. And it's connotations that are validating to their union.
Yeah.
And so to exclude that word for only heterosexual couples is hurtful in that way.
Yeah.
I think your analysis was right. I think that it comes from feminism.
Definitely.
And I think that she really believes that. I really think that she thinks that this is a threat to her conception of feminism. And so when I hear that and I hear someone who's smart and sincere, both of which I think she is, I try to understand where this view is coming from.
Yeah.
So let's step back for a second, like we always do. How old is she? Do you know?
I'm not sure, but I think she's rather old. I think she's like at least late 40s, 50s.
Well, I guess that makes you rather old, huh? She was born in 1965, so that makes her 57 years old.
Yeah, old.
I guess so. Part of my generation,
Part of your
I can say, right?
Yeah.
One thing that I would say from someone who grew up in the 70s is that feminism was just happening then, right? Like that's where we were developing the philosophical tools and language to even process feminism. And it was hugely controversial, of course, as it's still is today, right? But this was coming right after the civil rights movement, which was really 60s, at its heart. I think there was an equal amount of sort of enthusiasm and naivete. It was just part of a expanding of rights. We'd taken care of minorities, and now it was women that were going to get that full treatment. And it was actually a rough go. I don't think it wasn't as obviously as obvious of a win as it was for minorities. And so, like you said, women have still been fighting that battle. She's still part of that generation where they were fighting so hard for those rights. And it was so hard to get men to respect a women's movement. And to finally acknowledge that women, one, are different than men, and that those differences should be celebrated.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that, about some of these newer laws and the new conceptions that really is a trigger point for her and other people who are more conservative on that issue is that you essentially can just declare whether you're a woman or a man. So I think that really for someone like HK Rowling, it's offensive for her to think that men can just now all of a sudden join the club.
Yeah.
To her, that's just like the ultimate slap in the face to someone who, in her mind, was fighting for women.
Yeah, it sort of feels like to me that although she does consider herself to be very progressive, and she is sort of still following the progress that she was born into. And so she's not fully acknowledging the way that things have progressed since then.
Well, yeah, and I think that happens to people, right? I mean, I think that especially if they're progressive.
Yeah, definitely. Because they're progressive when they're younger, and they haven't really seen how things have, in fact, progressed.
Okay, you want second quote?
Sure.
When you throw open the doors of bathrooms and changing rooms to any man who believes or feels he's a woman, and as I've said, gender confirmation certificates now may be granted without any need for surgery or hormones, then you open the door to any and all men who wish to come inside. That's the simple truth.
Well, she's basically saying that these policies could lead to men into pretending to be transgender and preying on women in changing rooms and restrooms. And I think she's also giving the implication that transgender women would also be a part of the men that are preying on people.
Let's ask the first question. From a practical standpoint, is this actually what happens?
I don't think that she's completely lying here. I think this is genuinely a part of her beliefs. But she is also, exaggerating, dramatizing to further her own goals. And here is an argument that I've seen brought up quite a lot against transgender people, which is restroom laws, what people should be allowed in them, which people shouldn't be allowed in them. And I think that although I see the logic, I see the reasoning that they're coming from, I think that these arguments work much better online than they do in a real reality. Because in terms of the real argument here, which is that transgender women are pretending to be women to sexually prey on women and often young girls, which are using the argument commonly, I think. I don't think that being allowed in a restroom grants you the further ability to prey on women and girls. I think that being in a restroom, it sort of offers this false sense of intimacy, of privacy, that the argument is surely trying to target here. And they're trying to be like, restroom is your safe place, a public restroom is your safe place. This is a place where you're exposed to the world somewhat, and they're trying to invade this private area. When public restrooms aren't private at all, they never have been. And I believe that anyone who is trying to prey on someone in a public restroom would have difficulty there as much as they would have difficulty anywhere else. Public restrooms, which are the entire argument here, involve going to private stalls and then doing your business, and then that's it. And anyone who was trying to prey on anyone there, it would be pretty obvious that they were. Another argument there is that if a man is trying to get into a restroom in order to prey on women, he's probably not going to be stopped by his legal gender identity. He's not going to be stopped by a sign on the door.
So I think that your argument here is that she's really creating what we'd call a straw man argument.
Yes.
Upon thinking about this a little bit and hearing what you said, I think that's probably fair. So, but I would say this. You can see in an extreme case that if you really try to legislate this all the way to the fine details, it creates a complication. We know that men will push the bar as far as they can. Mm-hmm. And a man who had no interest in really being a woman could illicitly misrepresent his internal state, become officially declared a woman, and then have a legal right to sit there and be pervy in the bathroom a little bit.
I think that if you're worrying about men being pervy in the bathrooms, you should start to worry about anyone being pervy in the bathrooms, because anyone has the equal ability to be pervy in the bathroom.
Let's be, of course, most explicit here. Most sexual violence that occurs in any bathroom is certainly a man perpetrating that violence against a woman.
Yes.
And it can happen in the women's room or the men's room, because that's how violent some men can be.
Yeah.
And bathroom laws or changing the signs on the door doesn't do shit about that.
No. She's using buzzwords and concerns that people have and issues that people have real concerns with and that are real issues, and using them to sort of weave together this argument where bathrooms are a place where a man pretending to be a woman can come in and easily molest someone, which they wouldn't have been afforded to do before these laws have been stated. And she's making these things to make it seem like a super logical argument, but when you actually examine it closely, you find that it all sort of falls apart.
Okay, third quote from HK Rowling. Dress however you please, call yourself whatever you like, sleep with any consenting adult who will have you. Live your best life in peace and security. But force women out of their jobs for stating that sex is real. And then hashtag I stand with Maya. Hashtag this is not a drill. Maya Forstater was a British academic in a think tank, made the following statement. A man's internal feeling that he is a woman has no basis in material reality.
Presumably, she was fired for this opinion, for this thing that she said online, and then J.K. Rowling issued a statement publicly supporting her, saying that trans people can do what they want to do, but if people are asked to support them and believe them and validate them and who they are, then that's not something required, and for people to not believe in trans people is an offense that is not worthy of a job firing.
So, and one other thing that I thought was interesting in it, she says, but force women out of their jobs. So once again, she's hearkening back to this is like an attack on feminism for her, or actually women. Is Maya Forstater's statement that, a man's internal feeling that he's a woman has no basis in material reality, is that accurate?
Trans people are acknowledging that gender is a separate social thing from sex, and that someone's gender can be different from their sex. And they're saying, this is my gender, it may not align with what I look like or what I was born as, but it is true, and this is who I am, and I'm just asking you to respect that. And so I personally believe that. I think that gender is a social concept, while certainly real, is more complex and not quite as connected to sex.
And one thing that I would put in addition to that is challenge the whole premise that internal states aren't valid reasons for laws. So, for example, a way that an internal state matters is for a gay man to say, my attraction to men is real.
Yeah, essentially by saying that, she's pushing a belief that says that any internal state has no effect on an external state, and since it cannot be truly proven, is not real.
Well, yeah, and there's tons of laws, whether it's about, minorities or anything else, that are based on our internal states.
It could be about anything.
It's just like, I don't like taking those particular internal states seriously, because they're threatening to me as a woman.
Because obviously she believes in other internal states.
Yeah. But let's go to the other point, the one, the really HK Rowling's point, is that she has the right to state this without fearing reprisals from her employer.
Well, of course, I believe in the right to free speech. And Maya should feel free to issue hate speech however she wishes. But I think that it's important to be aware that by being a person and by having access to the World Wide Web, especially now, which allows you to issue your statements to an audience of millions, even billions, you are responsible for your own actions and for the statements you take. And so you have to acknowledge what you're saying online because of your digital footprint, because of your employer's perception of you. You have to be aware of what you're saying and what your history is. That's what people say about any employer. Hey, your employer might not hire you if you've said bad things online before, or things online that they disagree with. And so by firing her for stating this transphobic hate speech, they seem to just be following a very clear example of what people have stated for years, which is what you say matters, and if you say something harmful or hurtful, especially to a minority group, then your company might not feel comfortable with you representing them anymore, and so will fire you appropriately.
And that's pretty well baked into people's opinions about, like, race and that sort of thing.
Yes.
I mean, if you go online and start spewing a bunch of racist, hateful stuff, then people are not going to feel particularly sympathetic to you if you get fired for that.
Exactly.
So I guess, through this whole analysis, do I believe that J.K. Rowling is a hateful person? No, I don't think that I don't think that, transgender people freak her out. I think that she finds it offensive that men can just declare themselves a woman and all of a sudden be part of her exclusive and hard-fought feminist club. But I also don't think it's she's a terrible, terrible person for being in that particular position, given who she is and her history and her present.
Well, I think J.K. Rowling is a pretty hateful person when it comes to trans people. And I think that she genuinely believes that what she's saying is helpful for feminists and that trans people are harmful for feminism as a movement and for women. And I think that by thinking that and not allowing herself to expand her beliefs or learn the truth or go past her own ignorance, she is being the opposite of progressive. And she is holding on terribly tightly to the beliefs that she was born into and the beliefs that she believed when she was younger that were progressive back then. And by doing that, she is, in fact, being just as harmful as anyone who has ever held on to their beliefs, ignoring any fact or truth on the matter, and actively engaging in hateful speech towards people that disagree with those beliefs. And I also think that although she claimed to know and love trans people, and she might even know trans people, she cannot fully support and love. She cannot fully love trans people. She cannot fully support trans people, and she cannot fully respect trans people while actively engaging in speech that makes it very clear that she believes trans people to not be particularly valid, to not be particularly truthful about their gender, and that if it doesn't affect her, it's fine, but if trans people begin to encroach into her own areas of feminism, then she instantly takes priority of women over trans people, despite the fact that there are many women in the transgender community by both her definition and mine, and that by not standing by them all the way, she does not fully support, respect, or love the trans community.